So in solo leveling Arise, the Army of Shadows is one of the most important mechanics within the game, which is why in today's video I'm going to go over all of the different shadows in the game and what they do, and whether you should gain more shadows or level others up first, how to get them, and also just all future shadows that are going to release in the future. So the very first shadow that you're going to obtain will be, of course, Igris. You'll be able to obtain him once you've beaten the actual story where you fight Igris, so just keep that in mind. And when it comes to shadows, they'll have their rank right here, which Igris at the very base will be just a common rank, and then can be raised all the way up to an elite knight rank. And this can just be done just by using these traces of shadows, which I'll go over how you can get those in a second. So essentially what all these shadows will have, they'll have their own shadows authority, which is basically a passive skill that depending on who you have lead your shadow army, you'll be able to benefit off of this passive. So if you have Igris lead your shadow army, you'll be able to have all of your team members get a 7% increase in critical hit rate, so always really nice. But just keep in mind, once you're at the common rank, it will be only a 4%. And also all the shadows will have all different kinds of skills, up to 5 each, but you'll only have 4 to begin with, and then once you level them up much more, you'll be able to get their final skill. So obviously we have a basic attack, which is just going to be him, Igris, just swinging, just doing damage. Then we have another basic attack, which is just slightly more damage, and then we have quadruple wave, which basically you'll slash like 4 times or whatever to attack the enemy from distance, which will do a bit more damage as well. And then the next skill is where pretty much all of the vast majority of the value you're going to get out of your shadows is actually going to come from, as Earth Slash is going to be the main skill that Igris is going to be getting the most value out of for a very long time until you've leveled him up to get his final skill. But what this skill will do up to around like 300% damage of the user's attack, and this will scale off of Jinwoo's attack, not necessarily Igris's attack as well. And when this skill hits, you'll be able to inflict bleed on the target and cannot be applied to world bosses, but I don't think world bosses are in the game yet, so that's fine. And then once you get him leveled up to, I believe it's just the knight rank, I believe it is, then you can unlock the final skill, which for Igris is going to be called Blade Axle, and this will just do damage, and then it will apply the attack increase effect of 100% for 10 seconds, and I'm pretty sure this is only to himself and not to you. I'm not too sure about that, but I'm pretty sure it would just be to Igris himself. Then the next available shadow is actually going to be Tank, and Tank is going to be a more of a defensive supporting kind of shadow, whereas Igris is a much more aggressive damage dealer. As just obviously like Igris, he'll have all of his skills do damage, just like normally, but his actual main skill being Tank Press will deal 382.92% of the user's attack when the last attack in the combo hits. It will then stun the target for a second. So it seems relatively useful. And also, just one thing to mention, you can also use shadows in hunter mode, so things like the Shadows Authority right here, which is going to be tanks, and he'll basically increase all team members' defense by up to 6%, and that can go all the way up to a 10.5% increase. And the reason why other Shadow Authorities actually might be somewhat useful is, for example, you're in hunter mode and you've got characters like Seo Jiwoo or Emma Lawrence, for example, you're going to want to increase the amount of damage that these characters can do, so being able to benefit off of what they scale off of, like their HP stat, because that's what these two characters both actually scale off of, then what you can do is you can actually choose to swap around who you want to have actually lead your army. So for example, if I wanted my Iron to lead the army, he can increase both just my whole party's HP, which will not only just benefit them just generally and stuff like that, but it will also make them do more damage. So just keep that in mind when it comes to actually what shadows that you do want. Is you've also got to pay attention to what hunters you have and what stats they need to scale off of to do a bunch of damage. But after getting sidetracked, we have Tank's main skill that he'll unlock once you get into whatever rank it is. I can't remember what it is, which is called Tank Overkill. So we saw that Igris will apply the attack increase buff, but instead what Tank will do 517.56% of the user's attack, and then when using this skill, it will apply the defense increase effect to all shadows up to 40%, which is really good. It's always very nice because then your shadows can be a lot tankier, and which means they can then stay on the field for much longer as well. And then the third shadow you can unlock is Iron, and I like Iron. He's pretty cool. Just obviously like with all the other shadows, we'll just do basics damage with all of his skills and stuff like that. And then with his Shadows Authority will increase all team members' max HP by 6%. And then his main skill is going to be called Charge Iron, which basically it will do 143.75% of the user's attack as damage. When the skill hits, you'll apply the defense decrease effect as well. And this will be a 12% defense decrease as well for up to 10 seconds as well. So if you really want to get the most out of like your ultimate damage and stuff like that, you can really time it nicely to when Iron uses this to then say use Jinwoo's ultimate or just any other character's ultimate. to then do even more damage. And then we have his other skill. Once you get him to a much higher rank, we have Iron Angry, which will basically do up to 432.26% of the user's attack as damage. And then when this skill is used, you'll apply a shield effect, which is 10% of the user's max HP and is granted to all shadows as well. So just like tank, Iron is also making your shadows a lot tankier by supplying a lot of HP. And then we have Blades. Blades is probably my favorite shadow I've used so far, mainly just because of one of his final skills, Frost Gazer, which I'll get into in a minute. And Blades is actually, I believe, a completely game unique shadow, which is always really cool. And his shadow's authority is basically says all team members will gain a 3% attack increase, which is obviously fantastic because all of Jinwoo's skills will scale off of attack. And this value can be increased all the way up to 6%, and just also, my god, all of the Shadow's designs at max is just ridiculous. They all look so good. So we have all of his basic skills and basic attacks like that, which all do great damage, but it's when it comes to this basic skill right here, Frost Gazer, as I mentioned before. And essentially what this does, the user will gather the power of the coldness into a sword, plunging it into the ground, and then attacks by unleashing a blast of coldness to where the enemy is located. So I'll probably chuck some gameplay of this on screen, but this skill is amazing, and the reason for this is mainly just because of the fact that it can clear out so many enemies extremely easily, and then it's because of this, it's just what for me gives Blades or Baraka just so much value as a shadow in general, and it's just really cool and useful because you can just clear out a ton of enemies really easily and quickly. And then his final basic skill is just Spinning Strike, which will just do 293.75% of the user's attack, and then we'll apply the attack increase effect. So just like how Igris's work, it'll be a 100% attack increase for 10 seconds. Alright, so now that I've gone over what all the shadows do, it's time to go over which shadows you should actually want to pick. And of course, Igris is one that you get completely for free, so there's no really point in talking about him. So I do think the next best shadow that you can actually pick is actually going to be Blades or Baraka, just simply because of the attack increase. So he's always going to be really useful for DPSs, just in general. As well as, of course, the Frost Gazer skill, which is probably my favorite skill that any of these shadows have in general, just because it does a huge amount of AoE damage, which is amazing. And then we're left with two choices being Iron, as well as also then Tank. So I think for these two, it's just going to come down to your actual own personal preference. As for Tank, he's a lot more supportive, whereas I feel like Iron is slightly more aggressive, as Tank's ability to stun is really useful, as well as giving defense increases, as you can use this sort of shadow authority to increase the damage of characters like Dongsu, as well as also Wu Jinchul, as well as Baek Yoonho is also their all defense scalers, so you can always use that. But then if you want to utilize Iron's HP increase, then that's going to greatly benefit characters like Seo Jiwoo, as well as Emma Lawrence, as well as other characters like Min Byung-gu as well. So it really just depends on what other hunters and stuff that you have and what other abilities you want to utilize from those shadows. So then if you've got a lot of hunters that you like to use that scale off of the HP stat, then I probably would definitely say that Iron is probably going to be your best bet. Or if you feel like using hunters that are really good with the defense stat, then you can get Tank instead. So then the first question that probably should be answered is, should you actually gain more shadows? So should you unlock more shadows like Iron or Tank or Blades, for example, right here? Or should you actually spend your traces of shadows to actually level them up? As in order to unlock a shadow, you need to get 100 traces of shadows, which can be primarily obtained from gates. And I'll show other methods where they can be gained later on in the video as well, but overall, I do think you definitely should just unlock as many shadows as possible, just because, well, one, I think that's probably where you're going to gain the most total power, of course, and it's also just a lot more fun way of playing as well, because then you can see what all these shadows do differently in comparison to the other, and how it actually reflects in the actual gameplay of it all. And not only that, because they all specialize in different things, it just does mean that you can cover lots of different things, as like characters like Iron, as well as also Igris specialize in a lot of single target work, being able to apply bleed and defense decreases. Whereas if you've got like Blades, for example, Blades is very good at dealing with like a huge amount of enemies on the screen at once. So it also just allows you to cover a lot of different bases, as well as which is going to allow you to tackle all different kinds of content and make it just a much easier time, basically. So then, speaking of traces of shadows, the Battlefield of Time is going to be probably the best place for you to actually get these things, as if we go ahead and look at the ranking systems, and we go to, I believe it's group rewards it's under, you'll be able to get them towards at the end of every boss once they've actually expired. So if you get rank 1 in your group, then you can get up to 50 of them, and then the minimum I believe you can get is 5 if you end up in the top 100% of your like division or rank or group or whatever. So this is going to be the most consistent place for you to actually get a lot of these, as well as farming in gates as well. And within gates, you'll also be able to see that you can get traces of shadows, as well as abyssal energy, as well as abyssal fragments, and then also shadow energy, which are all materials used for leveling up your army of shadows and just your individual shadows. And then with shadows, just like hunters and stuff, you can actually upgrade them, which will just increase the total army power, and these will basically spend things like the abyssal fragments as well as the abyssal energy, and this will just basically increase your power. So you can always just do this with all of your shadows and not have to worry too much. And then you can also level up your just army as a whole, which will increase their power as well as the maximum army capacity. And essentially what this will do, it will increase the maximum amount of shades that you can actually hold, as I can currently hold up to 12,000 shades. So if I leveled it up, I could then hold 13,000. And essentially shades are basically just sort of, I guess, like a sort of like stamina thing that you spend in order to actually summon your shadows, and you can just obtain these doing things like stories and story missions and gates, as it mentions here. And you don't really run out of these too often, I don't think, especially if you are just consistently playing through content and stuff. So then to end things off, you might have noticed that I've only really spoken about 4 shadows so far, and there's this one that's right in the back right here. And this is because this is actually an unreleased shadow, but it's just here ready to be unlocked, as this shadow should very likely is going to be Tusk, who is one of the shadows that Jinwoo actually unlocks throughout the series. And if we take a look at the roadmap, we'll know that on May we'll also get the story chapter where Tusk will actually feature, as well as also another shadow, which will definitely most likely be actually Tusk. So there you have it. That is everything to do with the army of shadows. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments down below, and I will make sure to answer them. And if you enjoyed this video or you found it useful, then don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace!